What is up, guys? Archon, I'm here, bringing you guys a re-upload of the video I did yesterday. If you guys weren't aware, that video had no audio, and I apologize for that. Some settings got tweaked, and the audio didn't record. I'll try to make sure it doesn't happen in the future. Basically, what we're going to do here, since patch 8.2 was announced to be releasing next Tuesday, June 25th, and this is the final version of the PTR, which is the June 4th version, so if you guys have already watched a video on this, you already know what these are. It's 2 weeks old. I'm not doing it for the new factor. I'm doing it just to have a final PTR patch and then compare what goes live from what we have here, as well as what 8.2 looked like initially when it launched on the PTR. So bear with me, guys. This video is going to be kind of long. It's going to have a little bit of quick maths in it, as well as maybe me losing my train of thought here and there. I apologize in advance for that, guys. Anyway, let's get into it and break it down. Frost Fever is getting changed to where the first target is applied to, and when it procs, has a 30% chance to give you 5 runic power back. So the simple version is that whenever you use Howling Blast and it puts Frost Fever on that first target that you hit with it, it will have a 30% chance when it procs to give you guys 5 runic power back. And then the other targets are obviously diminished back down to whatever it is initially. So this is to give Death Knights a better chance at getting runic power, especially during Breath of Sindragosa, as well as just in general for their next buff, which is a buffed Frost Strike, which is 4% increase on both multipliers, which is nice. Frost Strike definitely needed a buff because the Runic Spender felt really bad to use. This is actually a buff to Obliteration as well if you think about it, because you can't use Frost Strike during Breath of Sindragosa because it burns through your Runic power. And you can use it during Obliteration to, get procs back and forth for your killing machine or whatnot. So if you look at it that way, it's a buff for Obliteration without actually directly buffing the talent, which I think is good. Killing Machine is also being changed from a 1.5 to a 4.5% procs, not percent, but procs per minute. So we'll have to see how this affects the class in general, because with some of the changes down below to talents, which we'll get into here in a minute, I think this could have a really big impact on the current final tier for Frost Death Knights. Runic Empowerment is going from 1.5 to a 2.0 chance, which is really big. If you're not aware what this means, it basically means that Frost Strike, whenever you use it, it has a 50% chance to give you a rune. So it's a 50-50 now, which is crazy. From what it would have been, which I think would have been like 35% chance. So instead of a third of the time, it's going to a half of the time. And this also affects Breath of Sindragosa because Breath is being changed a little bit too. So it's losing some of the attack power multiplier. It's losing about 4% of that, or 5% of that. And is going from 15 runic power to 16. And while the increase doesn't seem that big, it means that it's going to be a 32% chance instead of a 24% chance to give you a rune back, which is a third of the time, which is really nice. Or roughly a third of the time. The other change is that whenever you use Breath of Sindragosa, you now generate 2 runes at the start, so this means that you can get into Breath faster. And when you use that final Obliterate, you'll go right in, it'll cap you at 100, hit it, get the runes back, and then you'll have more runes to use to keep up your runic power, while Empower Rune weapons going, as well as some of the other talents that can give you a rune back. So you'll definitely feel Breath of Sindragosa maybe be active for longer than what it currently is, and I think that's the hope that Blizzard has, which is why they're nerfing the base attack power on it. And then at the end of it, you're guaranteed to get 2 runes back for another Obliteration, which then gives you the ability to go back into Frost Strike and 50-50 for another rune, which I think is good. So your rune rotation will be a little bit cleaner, is what it's looking like. So you guys should have less downtime with these changes, hopefully. And then the big change is actually the ice cap. And I say this is a big change, and while it doesn't look that big, being 3 seconds down up from 1, if you take Ice Cap, you lose Breath of Sindragosa, so your only runic spender will be Frost Strike. You won't be able to take Obliteration either, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, your crit strikes on Frost Strike will reduce the cooldown of Pillar of Frost by 3 seconds. And if you recall, Pillar of Frost only has a 45-second cooldown. What this means is that with the procs per minute change up here to Killing Machine, you could actually get 12 seconds just off of Killing Machine procs, reducing the cooldown to, 36, or no, actually 24 seconds, because like I said, it has a 9 active, and once it hits 36, it's just down and does nothing for you, so you'll reduce another 12 there to 24 potentially. Like I said, crazy math. Frost Strike crits will also help reduce this, and that's not including any of them or any obliterates that you get that are crits outside of, the Killing Machine procs. So you could actually see an uptime of your Pillar of Frost being insanely increased. Like you could almost have it up probably not. I'm not going to say within the time that Pillar goes down, but it's going to be really close to that. And the other big buff you have to look at too here, and it's not going to show here, but what it's going to do is with all the runic regeneration that they're giving you, Remorseless Winter and Endless Winter might actually be a really good talent to take now over top of Syndragosa's Fury because of all these changes. With all the runes that you have, you can increase your, Remorseless Winter to almost indefinitely. I would imagine you could probably keep it up long enough to where once it ends, you would have Remorseless Winter up again to cast again. It doesn't show that here, but that's some of the thought process that I'm giving it. I can't wait to test some of this stuff out on 8.2. I'm going to mess around with some Frost because I have some armor for it, even though I do play Unholy. I do have a set that I can use. So Frost is looking pretty interesting. There's a lot of things I want to play around with and test and see if I can't get working. I'm sure a lot of people have already done it if they play on the PTR. It's already been 2 weeks, so. But it doesn't stop me from being able to test some of the things that I want to try. We'll see. PvP I don't do, so you guys will have to let me know down below what these changes impact and let me know how they are. I will kind of talk about them though. Chill Streak's going from a percentage of the target's total health to just a flat 100% of your attack power. I don't know if that's more damage or less damage. You'll have to let me know down below. Unholy fixed a bug that caused armies, ghouls to have double benefit from haste, which is being removed to compensate. We're getting a 6% damage increase on our army ghouls, which would be the ghouls summoned by Apocalypse and army. Not made clear. I'm not sure how this is gonna work or how this is gonna affect army. This seems good, I guess, because army is like a 7 to 8 minute cooldown. 8-minute cooldown. So maybe the 6% will offset the double haste that we were getting from the energy. I don't know, I can't say. I'm hoping it does, and I'm hoping that army just doesn't fall off and hits like a wet noodle now, because that would be actually really bad for an 8-minute cooldown. Apocalypse, it'd be whatever, because it's a 1.5, which is less than the Frost Breath of Syndragosa, so I'd be okay with, the Apocalypse ghouls hitting less hard. But army needs to hit hard because it's a giant cooldown. Looks like we're getting a 7% increase to Death Coil, which is actually really good for our single target. Death Coil, as it is now, already hits like a truck, especially if you have like 6 or 7 Festermite stacks. I think I'm hitting, 15 to 20k crits with Death Coil when it does hit. So I can't wait to see how much more damage I can deal with Festermite stacks. Festering Strike is also being buffed by 15%, which it needed to be. Festering Strike feels really bad currently for, the amount of runes it uses, as well as the 2 to 3 wounds that you put on a target. I wish they would just get rid of the RNG aspect and give you a flat runes. Even if it was just 2, I would be fine with, because it means you have to, use 6 runes to get 6 wounds. Which, while that would suck, it would be understandable. And while it is nice to occasionally get the, 4 rune special where you get 6 wounds on a target and then can swap and then put another set of wounds on a target, it just doesn't feel that good right now. But hopefully this buff makes Festering Strike feel a little better. This will also buff our single target. And they're also buffing the Festering Wound damage itself when you proc it with Scourge Strike. It's going up by 3%. Dreadblade's just getting a fix for the wording of it. Spelling anyway. And they're also buffing Scourge Strike by what appears to be like 7% if you add the 2% changes up. I'm sure it's not additive like that, but at the same time, it's like a 7% increase on your Scourge Strike damage in general, roughly. So these changes here are kind of weird, because I didn't think Unholy AoE-wise was very bad. I think it's one of the top classes for AoE, but our single target did suck. Not gonna lie there, it is pretty rough if you don't have the army cooldown. You're pretty consistent, but you do kind of spike a little bit, I guess, with army. Not as hard as what Breath does, but still. I wonder if some of these changes were to offset some of the army changes maybe for our single target. But the Festering Wound changes and the Scourge Strike changes are just going to buff our AoE to just ridiculous levels. I don't know I'm sure we're going to get hit somewhere to compensate once 8.2 comes out and people realize just how broken Unholy is now with these changes. I can't see them not realizing that, but if the army changes aren't as bad with the 6% as what the double haste was, and these are actually flat buffs and not just something to stabilize the class from the army loss and the apocalypse loss, then I think Unholy is actually going to be really good in the next patch. Like, they may actually even be top tier next patch. And I honestly can't wait for that because we've kind of struggled along since BFA launched. They gave us some things here and there. And right now, I think we're in a fine spot in 8.1.5. I didn't think they needed to buff, the festering wound damage or the scourge strike damage. I'm fine with the festering strike and the death coil because that helps our single target, and that's the only thing that those would affect is single target. Because our AoE, like I said, is already really strong. The festering wound and the scourge strike change is just going to put us, I think, over the top, and I'm sure we're going to see, like, within a couple weeks, some of this being toned down a little bit. I'm sure they're going to hit our festering wound damage again, and they're also going to hit scourge strike to offset some of the changes they made. I don't think they're buffing Unholy in the right direction without setting them up for some type of guillotine to be hyper nerfed later. Clawing Shadows has to be buffed as well to compensate for the Scourge Strike buffs. You cannot buff Scourge Strike without buffing Clawing Shadows, otherwise Clawing Shadows just falls way behind. I think right now I have 63% mastery and it's only like a 200 damage increase from just the normal Scourge Strike. So you're almost better off running All Will Serve and using a bunch of haste trinkets to get the other minion to hit, especially for single target. The only time I could maybe see Clawing Shadows be used is if it's a boss fight where you're nowhere near the boss and you just have a ranged ability to peg away at the boss. Even then, I think maybe All Will Serve might be better. Again, the only time, well, I guess the other scenario would be like if you couldn't get near the boss but he had ads around him that you had to kill, you could drop your Death and Decay on yourself and then just, Clawing Shadows over and hit everything around the boss. In an AoE cluster, that's the only time I think you'd ever take Clawing Shadows. Either that or maybe Explosive Weeks when you just want to get them down without actually having to worry about walking over to them. They're like near a mob or something. So yeah, that is the changes to Unholy. I will talk more about those, I think, once 8.2 gets here. I'll talk about DKs in general once 8.2 gets here. I want to talk, there's like a lot more theory crafting and stuff I want to talk about, but we'll continue on. So it looks like they are nerfing the Chaos Strike attack multiplier by 1% and then 2 for the other side. And then buffing the Mastery in general. And then nerfing Trail of Ruin by 2.5% roughly. Not sure how that affects Havoc or if it does anything for them. I assume the Mastery changes would probably help you out a little bit. Because it affects your other abilities in a slight way. Demon Hunter tanks, we talked about this in the last video. They're wanting to make Demon Hunter tanks less squishy outside of Demon Spikes. And I think these changes are actually going to do that. Like 15% reduction instead of 10, and your stamina is increased. Sorry, it's an armor increase of 20% as well. So that's actually going to be really good. So on top of your armor reducing the physical damage, you get another 15 on top of it, and you guys can also deal with magic mitigation as well with the 15%. So that should help out pretty well. And then Demon Spikes is obviously getting nerfed to compensate for the Demonic Wards buff, so you guys aren't super over the top when Demonic Spikes is up. Makes sense. And then Metamorphosis is actually getting a really big buff, it looks like here. So since the 15-second cooldown, or 15-second active for a 3-minute cooldown, that's really good. On top of that, you guys are getting 50% bonus health instead of the 30% you guys have. And you guys are getting double the armor of the current Metamorphosis. So instead of 100, you're getting 200%. So you guys should be really tanky during your 3-minute cooldown, which is good for you guys. Soul Cleave is also getting a buff in damage to 58. So it's about a 17% increase, roughly. That's a typo, by the way. It's definitely not 5,835%. That would be, just one-shotting mobs left and right. Well, I mean, the buff would make you viable. It would just make you warrior levels of viable, and then you just get nerfed immediately into the ground next patch. I feel for you, Protection Warriors. I really do. Anyway, PvP changes. I don't think there's anything here, so I'm not too worried. I think they removed Celestial Downpour. That's really the only change there. Remove the level requirement for freedom of herd. I think that's about it. This change was also talked about in the last video. So druids are going to have a better chance when they're tanking to have health regen from frenzied regeneration. So you get 33%. If you have the talent, it's 53%. And if you do the new frenzied regeneration, you can actually use your rage to give you an additional 18% up front. So that's roughly what? Almost 70% healing? That's pretty nuts. The ability is kind of on a long cooldown though, for how fast it comes up, but I mean that's a pretty good bounce back emergency heal. And especially in fights that are a lot of physical damage, you guys should be able to, use that one time and then put the rest into your Iron Fur to keep that up, because they're changing the stacks from 6 to 8, so you guys can have more stacks of Iron Fur, as well as reducing the rage cost from 45 to 40, so it flows a little better. Same with Maul. So Bear Tank should hopefully be a little less squishy to magic damage, since they can heal most of it off now with a burst back heal. And obviously they'll still be good against physical with the changes to Iron Fur. Same thing, Freedom of the Herd. That's the only PvP change here. The other change that we talked about in the last video is that they're letting Bear Form actually use Remove Corruption without coming out of Bear Form, which is really nice. So you can remove curses and poison from yourself if you're tanking. You can also use Rebirth, all that stuff. Soothe as well is another big one. I don't remember if you could use Soothe already in Bear Form. I want to say you could, but then again, it seems like I've been pulled out of Bear Form for trying to use it, so I can't really say. It's been a minute since I've Bear Tanked. And they're also removing the ability for non-Guardian Druids to cast Moonfire in Bear Form. So you guys can't just go into Bear Form and spam Moonfire. It'll pull you right back out. These changes are already live, so not worried about it. From what I understand anyway, these ones were already live. Talked about Barb Shot. All they're doing is a fix to offset the bug that was with it, so they're reducing the damage a little bit. So it should deal the same damage anyway. No real change here. Survival is getting a 3% increase to their mastery. Not sure really how that's going to affect the class, but a 3% increase to all your damage can't be that bad, right? Nerfing high explosive trap in PvP by 3%. This is kind of a big deal for mages. So apparently in one of the patch updates, the mage mastery got a 15% increase, and Blizzard just apparently didn't know about it. And if you guys aren't aware, Glacial Spikes hits like a freaking truck sometimes. And this would explain why. So rather than reverting the 15%, since they didn't record the buff, they are just going to take the percent out of the Glacial Spikes damage and nerf it by like 30%. Or 23%, sorry. They're nerfing it by 23%. So Glacial Spikes won't hit like a truck like it does now, but all your other abilities that were affected by the extra 15% will still stay affected. So Ice Lance and Frozen Orb and that should still be fine. Yeah. All those will still keep the 15% buff. It's just they're turning down Glacial Spikes to compensate. Brewmasters are getting Hot Trub changed, which is divided as fire damage, and it's now divided between all targets instead of hitting all players for the same amount, I guess. Touch of Death is being turned into Touch of Fatality and costs no chi and kills players under 120, or level 120 rather. Glimmer of Light is being nerfed a little bit by 100. So far, we're not planning any heavy changes to Glimmer of Light, so that's really about it for them. This is just a movement speed thing that can't be dispelled on Paladins now when they cast it on a friendly target. Not sure what all this is up here. Shadow Word Pain is being nerfed in Discipline by 4%, and the dot is being nerfed by 24% of your spell power. So that's a pretty significant damage nerf to Shadow Word Pain, I would imagine. PvP, don't really understand what all this is. I'll let you guys look at it and then let me know down below. Shadow is also getting hit with the Shadow Word Pain nerf. They're losing 4 and then 24 on the dot itself. They're also going to be losing 20% damage on Shadowy Apparitions. So it looks like they're hitting Shadow kind of hard here, as well as Discipline a little bit. We talked about the Rogue one before. The change here was that they want to make two targets Blade Flurry deal more damage, and 3 targets or more deal less damage. Is pretty much what they're trying to do here with this Keep Your Wits About You Azerite Power talent. Or trait. Whatever you want to call it. So I won't go too in-depth on that. Grips a target and lightning, stunning, and dealing 700% of spell power. which is always nice instead of dealing what it did before, which was $ oxygen percent chance of damage. Yes, I'm making a periodic table joke. O2 oxygen. So you guys are dealing a flat 700% of spell power instead of, like I said, $ oxygen percent. And we're also learning how to spell the word successfully with 2 L's instead of 1. So we're definitely in a successful direction. Your unstable affliction remains dormant on the target for 10 seconds after it expires, increasing your damage dealt to the target by 10 seconds. So they're changing how endless affliction works from it just increasing its duration by 6 to once it ends, you get a 10% damage increase. If dispelled, it now silences the dispeller and deals damage to them. Summon Demonic Tyrant. Not sure what this change here really is. They're just, I guess, cleaning up the text a little bit to not confuse people, maybe. It's your lesser demons now by 15 seconds. I'd imagine that's your imps, your stalker thingies that you summon. I don't know what else can be considered lesser. Who knows? Destruction is getting a weird change here. I don't know if this is a buff or a nerf or what it is. I don't know what the cooldown on Crashing Chaos is here, and it doesn't show me, so I can't really tell you. But it's reduced by 15 seconds, and your Summon Infernal's cooldown is reduced by 15 seconds, and it makes your next 8 Chaos Bolts deal 700 damage instead of 1k damage. So it's a nerf to the 8 empowered bolts, but you get your Infernal's cooldown reduced by 15 seconds. I don't know if that's a buff or a nerf. Let me know down below. Arms Warriors are getting buffs here to try to make them viable against Fury. So Arms is getting a 4% increase to execute. They're getting a 10% increase to their mastery, which is going to probably be really huge. Deep Wounds damage is increased by 90%, dealing 37.5% of attack power bleed damage over 6 seconds. So it sounds really good on paper. And Mortal Strike is getting a 7% increase in the multiplier of attack power. And Slam is going up by 3.6. And then the talent Rend is getting a 1.5 boost. And on the back half of the bleed, you get another 4 or so percent. 4 or 5%. So they're really trying to put Arms in a place where it can compete with Fury, which I think is really good. But Protection Warriors, which we talked about in the last video, are getting a massive nerf on Unstoppable Force. It's a 70% damage reduction. And this is because they thought that Protection Warriors were dealing too much damage. A lot of people I've talked to say it's because of how Reaping works, and the numbers are kind of skewed because Reaping is just one giant mob of enemies that don't really do a whole lot. So of course, Arms is going to deal a crap ton of damage to them. And the numbers are kind of skewed because you're not pulling packs equal to what you would pull on a Reaping pull. So hopefully they see that and maybe they revert this change, or they just kind of keep an eye on it a little bit with the new affix replacing Reaping. We'll see. These are just general changes to the engineering trait, which makes it to where your Absorbotron no longer absorbs 100% of the damage. It only absorbs half, so you take half, he takes half, up to 11k, whatever, 11k, 11.5. And they're also changing how Synaptic Spark Capacitor works. Instead of hitting enemies within 651 yards, you're now only going to hit within 8. I'm guessing this is to prevent them from pulling, across the dungeon and, wiping you every 3 seconds. Kind of like what Frostwhelp needs to be. The racials, this is actually going to be, I think, really big for PvP. Humans are going to be really strong. Undead will probably be really strong. Dwarfs, I think, is what Stormform is. Yeah, Dwarf. Basically, this not sharing a cooldown anymore with the medallion you get that frees you from crowd control effects. You can now use every man for himself if you get stunned. Then if you get some other form of CC, you can use the medallion to get yourself out. And I think this is going to buff, humans, undead, and dwarfs for PvP to make them a little more viable. So yeah, guys, let me know down below what you guys think of some of these changes. Are you guys excited for the 8.2 launch this Tuesday? Did I miss anything? Can you guys let me know about any of the buffs for classes that I said I didn't really know a lot about? And as for the PvP stuff, same thing. Let me know what big PvP changes some of these are, if they are at all. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to link my Twitch down below, as well as the Discord. If you guys want to come hang out in there and talk with me, we can talk some 8.2 theory crafting stuff before it comes out this Tuesday. as well as I'll be live probably the moment the patch goes live. If you guys want to come in and hang out with, maybe do some things, I guess, do some quests or whatnot in the storyline for Nomer Gan as well as Najatar. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys in the next video. Later.